You've probably never heard the name, but for a few wild years, this was the fastest racing series on the planet. Faster than Formula One, faster than Indy cars that made over 1,100 horsepower, with some team estimates from the era claiming over 1,500, and almost no rules to stop them. It was called Can-Am, and for 9 seasons, it was the closest racing ever came to having no limits at all. But that same freedom that made it legendary is exactly what killed it. So what happened? It started in 1966. The Canadian-American Challenge Cup, shortened to Can-Am, was a new sports car series course, sanctioned by American and Canadian racing bodies, the SCCA and the CASC. 2 races ran in Canada and 4 ran in the US, and that's literally where the name came from. It ran under the FIA's Group 7 category, and the rules were almost nothing. 2 seats, a body covering the wheels, a roll bar, that was basically it. No cap on engine size, no limit on horsepower. Turbochargers, superchargers, and wild aerodynamics were all completely legal. It was about as close as any major racing series has ever come to anything goes. And early funding came from Johnson Wax, with prize money good enough to pull in serious international talent. Almost immediately, the first champion was a name racing fans already knew. John Surtees, already a world champion in both Formula One and Grand Prix motorcycle racing, won that inaugural 1966 title driving a Lola. But the team that would define the series more than any other hadn't even shown up yet. By 1967, Bruce McLaren had cracked the code. He wasn't just a driver. He built the cars himself. His team introduced the M6A that year, powered by a Chevrolet big block engine, debuting the orange paint job that's still McLaren's signature color today. Bruce McLaren and his teammate Denny Hulme, a New Zealander who was already a Formula One champion in his own right, became so dominant that fans nicknamed it the Bruce and Denny Show. From 1967 to 1971, McLaren won 43 of the series' 71 races, and 23 of those wins came back-to-back. That's not a good season. That's a monopoly. Bruce McLaren took the title in 1967, Denny Hulme in 1968, McLaren again in 1969, Hulme again in 1970, and Peter Revson in 1971, all of them driving cars with McLaren's name on the nose. Hulme alone finished with 22 race wins across the whole original series, more than double the next best driver. While McLaren was busy winning, one team was busy building things nobody thought should even work. Jim Hall's Chaparral squad introduced the 2E in 1966, the first Can-Am car with a high-mounted, driver-adjustable wing, developed with quiet off the books engineering support from Chevrolet's own research division. Then came the 2J in 1970, a car with 2 engines. One big Chevrolet V8 drove the wheels like normal. A second small engine, borrowed straight from a snowmobile, powered 2 fans mounted at the back of the car that sucked air out from underneath it and sealed it to the track like nothing else on wheels. Rivals called it the sucker car. It was banned within a year. By 1970, the series was at its peak. Money was good, crowds were huge, and Can-Am had become the place where the wildest engineering in motorsport actually got built and raced, not just imagined on a drawing board. Then, in June of 1970, while testing his own new car at Goodwood in England, the rear bodywork came loose at high speed. Bruce McLaren lost control and was killed instantly. He was 32 years old. The man who built the winning formula never got to see how far his own cars would eventually go. His team didn't stop. 2 days after burying their founder, McLaren's mechanics rebuilt the cars and kept racing, going on to win 9 of the 10 races that season anyway. But something in the series had shifted. What nobody saw coming next was where the real dominance would come from. You don't out-drive a team like McLaren, you out-engineer them. In 1972, Porsche entered with the 917/10 twin-turbocharged running close to 900 horsepower, partnered with Roger Penske's race team. It ended McLaren's 5-year grip on Can-Am in a single season. Then, for 1973, Porsche built something even more extreme. The 917/30, a 5.4-liter twin-turbo flat-valve engine in a car that weighed barely more than a modern economy sedan. Reported output was over 1,100 horsepower, and some period estimates from the team put race boost as high as 1,500 or more. Sources disagree on the exact number, but everyone agrees it was, and still is, the most powerful road racing car ever built. Mark Donohue drove it to 6 wins in 8 races that season, and took the championship almost without contest. Then he did something that should have been impossible. At Talladega Superspeedway, in a car with no roof, he set a closed-course speed record at roughly 221 miles an hour. At that exact moment, Can-Am was faster than Formula One, faster than IndyCars, the wildest race series on the planet. Porsche didn't just win races, it made every other manufacturer in the series look like it was competing in a different sport entirely. And that's exactly where things started to unravel. When one team wins that completely, a series doesn't get more exciting to watch. It gets emptier. To try to slow Porsche down, organizers changed the rules for 1974 and added a fuel consumption limit, the first real restriction Can-Am had ever placed on itself. A series built entirely on the promise of zero limits had just admitted, out loud, that it needed limits after all. At almost the same moment, the outside world stopped cooperating too. In October of 1973, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries declared an oil embargo against nations, including the U.S., that were supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Gas prices spiked. Lines formed at pumps across the country. Picture the timing. Gas lines stretched around city blocks, while a racing series kept asking sponsors to fund cars that existed purely to burn as much fuel as physically possible, as fast as possible. It wasn't a good look, and it wasn't sustainable, and everyone in the paddock knew it. Porsche's response was blunt. They let Penske out of his contract early. Donohue retired. The factory team that had just built the most powerful race car in history simply walked away. And they weren't the only ones leaving. Sponsors pulled back. The country was sliding into recession. Costs to build these cars had been climbing every single year, and there was nothing left to absorb the hit. The 1974 season started that June and was supposed to run through the fall. It got cancelled after 5 rounds in August. The most extreme racing series ever built didn't die in a blaze of glory. It just quietly ran out of gas, literally and financially, mid-season. So here's the truth behind Can-Am's rise and fall. It wasn't killed by boredom, and it wasn't killed by one bad season. It was killed by its own success. The freedom that built 1,500 horsepower monsters also made those monsters too expensive, too dangerous, and too thirsty to survive a decade that had stopped tolerating excess. That could have been the end of the story, but in 1977, the SCCA tried to bring Can-Am back. This version used converted Formula 5000 cars wrapped in clothes, wheel sports car bodywork. Some longtime drivers weren't fooled by it. One former champion later called it, bluntly, a marketing exercise. Still, it found some success early on. Patrick Tambay won 6 of 9 races in that first comeback season, and the series had a few genuinely good years heading into the early 1980s. But it was never the same. Where the original had 1,100 horsepower monsters, this version ran cars built from leftover single cedar chassis, and a new rival was rising fast. CART, the Championship Auto Racing Teams Series, pulled away drivers, teams, and sponsorship money throughout the early 1980s, and IMSA GT Prototype Series did the same from the other direction. By 1983, Can-Am had become a ladder series, a stepping stone, not a destination. The final race ran in 1987. Bill Tempero took the last championship, and almost nobody outside the paddock noticed. The series that once had zero limits ended up dying twice from the same disease. Money ran out and rules got added, and the exact freedom that made Can-Am legendary is what made it impossible to sustain. Today, vintage Can-Am cars still show up at historic racing events around the world, keeping the sound and the spectacle alive for people who never got to see it the first time. People pay millions of dollars for them at auction. A 917/30 alone has sold for more than $4 million. The cars survived. The rules that let them exist the way they did are gone for good, and no modern racing series would ever be allowed to run that way again.